Ladies and gentlemen, this is Betty Boop, and today we are excited to introduce to some of you and reacquaint many of you with an iconic female cartoon. Betty made her debut in the Max Fleischer animated cartoon Dizzy Dishes in 1930. She appeared first as a dog, but was an instant success on screen with her audiences. Max Fleischer realized a star was born and transformed Betty into a human in 1932. She had a childlike head and a flirtatiously saucy personality, and man did she love to sing and dance. She largely became known for her infamous catchphrase, boop boop badoop. She starred in over 100 cartoons and was a true symbol of her time, that of suffrage, the Prohibition, and the Great Depression. To understand her profound impact, let us take you on a journey. We begin first in the Roaring '20s, the golden age of animation, a vibrant, pleasure-filled time in America, in New York.
Betty Boop was born at 1600 Broadway at the Fleischer Studios. Fleischer Studios were one of the top 4 animation studios of the period. And in the late 20s to early 30s, they created some of the most iconic characters, these 4 animation houses. But Betty was unique. She was from New York. In stark contrast to the sunny LA Disney cartoons, the Fleischer cartoons were dark, gritty, and sometimes surreal. Nothing illustrates this better than the Disney portrayal of Snow White. While Disney's princess was lying placidly on a marble slab waiting for her Prince Charming to arrive, Betty Boop is running through the underworld, chased by Cab Calloway and her evil stepmother, who would later become a dragon. These crazy ideas came out of the heads of some of the most gifted animators of the period. They lived and breathed Depression-era New York City, spending weekends at the Coney Island freak shows, and we bet 1 or 2 late nights in the Midtown Manhattan speakeasies and pool halls. This all came to inspire what Betty Boop would look and sound like, from her cute head with her small nose, small mouth, and her body, which was modeled on the real woman that animator Grim Natwick had spent years drawing before joining Fleischer Studios as an animator. But Betty was also an entertainer. From her garter to her dress, her hair and her pose, she was born for the stage. She was going to be a star. And at a time when women's expectations were so limited, to be an entertainer was to be independent. And to be independent was to face hard times. The Fleischer cartoons never spent too long on this. Betty propelled through her cartoons with a sense of humor and a resolute confidence that no matter what happened to her, she would keep going, she would persevere, and she was going to make it. And what made Betty unique, made Betty popular.
But this didn't last. In 1930, the Hollywood Motion Picture Production Code was introduced, and in 1934, it went into effect. This was a set of moral guidelines that controlled content coming out of Hollywood and was a direct reaction to the number of scandals, risque films, and drug overdoses of the 1920s. And this didn't just affect movies. It also affected cartoons, and Betty Boop was forced to change. This is Betty Boop in 1933. By 1938, her proportions had been streamlined and made less provocative. Her dress became more demure. She lost her garter, and her hair was made longer. In addition, her role was changed. She was once a free-spirited adventurer, an entertainer, but now she was domesticized, relegated to the role of babysitter. Stripped of her charm, stripped of her individuality, stripped of her independence and everything that made her unique, in 1939, her cartoon was canceled.
But if the mainstream didn't want Betty, she would live outside of it. In World War II, she decorated fighter planes, which pilots flew into battle in which they would live or die, never knowing what was going to happen. These were light-hearted signs of defiance in very, very grim times. In the 50s, the age of conformity, there was very little room for Betty. And she appeared again on stage in the late 60s at a Led Zeppelin concert. And in the early 70s, animators at Cal Arts found old dusty boxes of her 16mm films and started holding film festivals with Betty as the headliner. While animators brought Betty's cartoons back to life, young entrepreneurs started bringing Betty back as a product. She appeared on birthday cards, candles, and negligees, and Betty was good for business. With the advent of VHS and advances in screen printing, Betty went mass, with at some point having over 200 licensees in North America alone.
But today, Betty went from icon to image, and she is literally everywhere. Excuse me. And she's everywhere. From t-shirts to teapots, urns to slot machines, tattoos to coffins, keychains to iPhone covers. When we span Betty's product categories, we can look at fashion as one example of her image disparity. We first see her on a satin bomber jacket sold at Supreme for $500, also worn recently by Bella Hadid, a super famous model in today's culture. Next, we see her on a $13 pair of Forever 21 socks marketed to girls under the age of 18. Again, we see her on a t-shirt sold in a Japanese collection in Asia for $150. And lastly, Betty even crosses over, serving as a male symbol on a men's Urban Outfitters t-shirt for just $28. As we conducted our market research, we wanted to gain a better understanding of people's knowledge of Betty Boop, how they associated with her licensed image, and what their associations were with her merchandise. And so we conducted a survey of 275 people. Knowing how widespread her image is categorically, we were really surprised that 66% of people said they wouldn't buy merchandise with Betty Boop on it. And when we took it to the streets, this is what they had to say. She's just sex.
She's an exaggerated pinup.
She's big eyes, boobs, and butt.
She is so not Barbie.
So all of this led us to wonder, why has Betty Boop lasted for 86 years? How has she endured? Because it is very clear that Betty Boop cannot be kept down.
To better understand Betty's longevity, we took a look at the cartoon landscape, and more specifically, the female cartoon landscape. We placed them onto a spectrum, and with variables ranging from adult-oriented to child-oriented, from dependent on male characters to independent, we found an opportunity in the adult-oriented and independent sections, right next to Wonder Woman and Lara Croft. But, while close in proximity, these characters are very different. Wonder Woman has super strength and the power of flight, while Lara Croft, born with a silver spoon in her mouth, she has an inheritance that fund her wildly dangerous adventures. But Betty, on the other hand, she stands on her own 2 feet, leveraging her wit and self-reliance to overcome any obstacle that life might throw at her. But because people don't know her backstory, they don't know anything about her.
So what is the way forward? If people only see Betty Boop as an image, as a sex symbol, then how do we introduce her unique backstory into her character? How do we take those differentiating traits that we know to be true to her and make them relevant for popular culture? In the market research that Lauren referenced, we also asked people about their ideal selves. How do they wish to be perceived? And people answered that they want to be perceived as confident, independent, and sexy. We also asked people how they perceive Betty Boop, and they answered flirtatious, playful, and sexy. So if Betty is sexy, and people want to be sexy, we know that trait is still relevant today, and that's one we want to keep. But people value confidence and independence, and those traits are true to Betty, and they need to be amplified. However, they are not differentiating enough. Betty can't own them. We need to find words that truly embrace her spirit.
So what does make Betty Betty? How do we amplify her in today's culture? Well, when Betty's confident, she's assertive and speaks her mind. She's feisty. When Betty's independent, she is a self-reliant city girl that can overcome any situation. Ladies and gentlemen, she's savvy. And sexy, well, that's a word fraught with complexity. Because being sexy has changed today. It is no longer what it was when Betty was born. Being sexy is not about the attention of a male gaze. Being sexy is about who you are and how empowered it makes you feel on the inside. It's bringing everything that we are, from our skinniness to our curves, up to the surface with the utmost determination. It has no age. It is body positive. It is me feeling how good I am. Being sexy today is feeling empowered in your own sexiness.
And taking Betty's confident sexuality, her feistiness, her savviness, we wanted to create a brand book with positioning language and guidelines to help define her voice going forward. And this begins with the Boop lexicon. Because Boop isn't just a name. It's a noun, it's an adjective, it's a verb. That's so Boop, you're booping. When you embrace the spirit of Betty, you're a Boop. This can also be a hashtag. And Betty's on a mission to just be Betty, adventurous, plucky, and perky. One and only Betty. Because when Betty is Betty, grits, guts, and effervescent joy make our day. Betty's got a vision. Because Betty knows that when other people walk, she runs in high heels. When other people say I can't, she says I can, and she does. When other people are quiet, she sings out loud. When other people back down, she keeps going with a smile. That's Betty being Betty, because Betty knows when we're ourselves, we are at our best. Betty has a core. We spoke of these attributes. Feisty, attitude is everything. Savvy, streetwise and in the know, and sexy, always for herself. And Betty has a point of view. She is the model of moxie. She is the queen of carefree. She is the classic suck symbol, and she is the original sass symbol. Betty Boop, our original sass symbol.
Any good brand needs some guidelines around it, and we have created a brand compass in order to make sure that Betty, when she's partnering or creating content, is at her most Betty. She has to be savvy, feisty, and sexy. She needs to partner with brands that allow you to be independent, body positive, and always encourage a bit of risk-taking. Another way Betty communicates her character is through her poses. When Betty poses in a sexy way, it's not for other people, it's for herself. And when she's confident, she's not brash, rude, or aggressive. She's empowering herself, and she's asking you to do the same.
These traits are meant to be used as a set of guardrails for Betty's everyday life, because every day, Betty is clever. She's not cerebral. Betty is flirtatious and not aggressive. She's determined, not hard driving. She's sweet and not sappy. And Betty is vivacious, not vulgar. And lastly, Betty is quirky and definitely not ditzy. And when Betty uses all of these traits, she can better engage with Betty's tribe. Betty's tribe lives in the moment, lives out loud, trusts their instincts, and believes in empowerment in themselves, because with everything Betty, it's confidence.
And for the last part of our brand book, to truly bring Betty's voice to life and into reality, we present the SAS Manifesto.
A red dress in a sea of black, that's a boob. Being the first one on the dance floor, and the last. A wink and a giggle. Flirting or joking, they'll never know. Going in the wrong direction on purpose, because that's where the secret shortcut is. There's a boob. Stepping over the line without looking down at it, without even caring it's there. Rising above the have-tos and can'ts and saying, I'm doing it my way. And always, always with a mischievous grin. A spirit, an attitude, irrepressible moxie. Major sass. That's so Boop. A Boop is Betty. Betty Boop. She's sung and sashayed, boop-boop-a-doop past rules and conventions for 86 years. And with a come-hither glance and zany charm, she beckons us to follow her and join her tribe of the feisty, the bold. So go with Betty, onto the empty dance floor that's waiting for a party, down the wrong way that's right, over the line, above the line, forget the line. Embrace your inner Betty and Boop. Ladies and gentlemen, Betty Boop, our original SAS symbol. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Brett Sanford Chung, a faculty member here at the Masters in Branding program, and I was fortunate enough this year to work with the great group at King Features and Hearst and these amazing students. One more time. So, and these wonderful people will introduce themselves in turn, but we are here to ask you guys questions because you need to defend your thesis, which was great. But what I've been dying to ask you is if there were anything else that in the world that you would, the next place you would like to see Betty. Money's no object, nothing's an object. Where is the next place you think is the right place for the original SAS symbol to appear?
Personally, I think it would be incredible to see Betty at the Super Bowl.
Doing what?
Showing her sass, Brett. Showing those football players what a real woman looks like.
All right. As usual, I have 2 questions for you. I'm Elizabeth Tallerman, also an instructor in this program and a thesis advisor to this incredible group of students. Other than merchandise, what would you do? Whom would you partner with to give people a chance to really get to know Betty?
Well, we were speaking of creating maybe a pop-up museum exhibit around Betty Boop because it would be great to have archives so that people could explore her story, make it really visually interesting, so that people, and this could be in Museum of Moving Image, just so that people could come and really get to know her better.
Great. And one more question. If Betty could share a piece of advice with all of us now, what would she say?
Attitude matters.
Hi, I'm Gina Cuba. I'm a proud alum of the program, and I got to work with this wonderful group for Thesis. So my question is, if she's the original SAS symbol, going forward, where do you see her in 10 years? How does SAS evolve?
That's a loaded question, Gina.
Well, I mean, it would be great to see her going forward if people actually knew Betty, because it's true that she really is an enduring icon, and the longer we spent with her as a group, the more we came to actually realize her importance in the world and in the culture. So if I feel as though if she moves beyond an image and reclaims this original SAS symbol, I'm not entirely sure what SAS will look like in 10 years. But Betty's got it. I don't think it's something that changes. It's not something that shifts to trends. It's an attitude, it's a way of seeing the world, and I don't think that will change. But it's about letting people know that that side of her exists.
Great. Well done.
freshly baked bread right out of the oven, the wafted scent of chocolate chip cookies from a bakery, your Nona's best pasta for Sunday dinner, and the cold brew that you look forward to at the end of a hot summer's day. Each of these culinary delights has something in common, and it's not the fact that they taste good, or that they remind us of home, or even that they might make us feel nostalgic. It's a teeny tiny molecule with an extremely long and fascinating history that spans 10,000 years. Gluten. A naturally occurring protein found in wheat, barley, oats, rye, and all of its other species and hybrids. Gluten is the magic that makes your bread fluffy and airy and helps to maintain the elasticity and shape of your food. That simple combination of water, flour, and heat has fed mankind since 10,000 BC, when humans first made the transition from hunter-gatherer to farmers, bringing families and communities together to literally and figuratively break bread. And it worked that way all the way through the Industrial Revolution, when we realized that we could make a lot more bread in a lot less time. So this was profitable for business and plentiful for our appetites. Or at least that was the case until 1952, when Willem Dick first identified gluten as the culprit behind celiac disease, an autoimmune illness in which the human body reduces the absorption of nutrients due to the ingestion of gluten. The symptoms for this can range from debilitating fatigue and chronic vomiting to more common ailments like bloating. Almost 60 years later, in 2011, William Davis pens his bestseller, Wheat Belly, and in it he advocates for a gluten-free diet. Why? He claims that gluten isn't only harmful for celiac sufferers, but for the general public. So when this goes mainstream, it becomes easy for gluten to be blamed for every common digestive ailment.
So gluten was introduced to our day-to-day language for the first time. Media outlets started covering it in every possible way. Should we all go gluten-free? Is it bad for our liver? Or is it good for our workout? The fast food chain Five Guys confirms that they are gluten-free, except for their bread. How to start a gluten-free family? How to raise a gluten-free kid? How to date gluten-free? And if your life plan doesn't work out, should you consider going gluten-free? Celebrities picked it up immediately. One by one, they started talking about how going gluten-free made them look good, feel great, but most importantly, lose weight. If you want to eat like an actress, goodbye gluten. Eating gluten-free has never been more glamorous. And all the celebrities are going gluten-free. Will you? The answer was a clear yes. This chart here demonstrates our increasing interest for gluten and gluten-free over time. Despite that, it stayed pretty much the same for celiac disease. And if this is not proof enough, let's take a look at this map to see how this trend spread over the country. This map shows our interest for certain diets over time. And let's pay close attention to purple, which is gluten. This interest was turned into demand by marketers immediately. We started seeing so many gluten alternatives for products in the grocery store aisles, and for the ones that are not in the food aisle. Even services like dating apps started catering for gluten-free singles. And we are willing to pay premium for gluten. This is why marketers were able to up the prices of gluten-free products up to 242% more than the regular products. 242%. And this is reflected in numbers too. Gluten-free market has been growing, and it is expected to keep growing almost 20% by 2019, reaching a market size of $2.3 billion. But this doesn't mean that we are well informed about gluten. Today, it is associated with all these serious conditions ranging from cancer to autism. Even people who choose to live a gluten-free life may not have a clear understanding of what it is.
Gluten, in case you didn't know, and I didn't know this, is a mixture of 2 proteins found in wheat and some other natural grains. But here in LA, it's comparable to Satanism. So we sent a camera crew out to a popular exercise spot right up the street from us to ask people who are gluten-free a simple question: what is gluten? What is this thing you will not eat? So we're going to meet a person that doesn't eat gluten, and together we're going to guess if they know what gluten is. Are you ready? Yeah! What else do you have to do?
Do you maintain a gluten-free diet?
I do indeed.
And what is gluten?
Okay, does he know what gluten is? No! Oh, everyone says no.
Well, as far as for me, how it affects my body,
But what is gluten?
this is pretty sad because I don't know.
We're 0 for 1. But I hate it, and I know. Next.
Do you maintain a gluten-free diet?
Yeah, I try to the best of my ability, yeah.
What is gluten?
Does she know what gluten is? No. Oh.
It's the wheat in products such as like bread or pastas, rice.
Why do you avoid it?
It makes you fat. I mean, like I said, I haven't researched it to the fullest. I have a girlfriend from Russia. She actually just got me into it. So she's reading a book about it.
Oh, okay. Russians know about gluten and Putin. They know about both of those.
So this lack of clarity created a stereotype in the minds of those who stayed out of the gluten-free tribe. And rest of us, we are left with a choice. Are you a gluten lover or are you a gluten hater? How come we became so opinionated about a teeny tiny molecule that we've been consuming for more than 10,000 years without even knowing its existence? And how psychologically fascinating it is that 30% of the US population is following a diet that is only prescribed to 1% who are celiac disease patients.
There is a lack of clarity when it comes to gluten, but gluten is not the only victim of food villainization. And in order to understand this gluten-free trend, we need to go back in history and look at some other food villains, such as fat. In the 1970s and 1980s, there was a growing concern for heart disease, and so we blamed gluten. We began to see a trend in low-fat dieting and low-fat products such as milk with various percentages of fat. But 30 years later, we had a change in perception when it came to fat. In 1984, scientists were telling us to not eat fat. It was harmful for ourselves. But now they are saying to eat it, and because it's beneficial and almost necessary for our health. But this consumption of fat led to an increase in our next villain, increase of consumption in our next villain, sugar. Between 1977 and 2010, Americans increased their sugar consumption by 30%. So much so, we had a new health fear, and that was diabetes. So we began to see a trend in low sugar dieting as well as low sugar products. But even though we were following these fat-free and sugar-free diets, we weren't necessarily losing weight. In fact, the obesity was on the rise. So we needed to blame something else. We needed another villain, and that was carbs. And we began to follow low-carb diets such as Atkins, and again, like with sugar-free and fat-free, we began consuming sugar-free, low-carb products. But the cycle of villainization will continue because when there's a fear, there's always a response. With heart disease, the response was fat-free. With diabetes, the response was sugar-free. With obesity, the response was low-carb. And finally, now, as we become more concerned about our immunity, the response is a gluten-free diet. But it's so much easier to blame something else than it is to blame ourselves. So if we were to look at the timeline of villainized foods, we can see that In recent years, there's always been a villain at one point or another. And these villains are increasing. But that is also reflected in the way we are dieting. We are constantly coming up with new ways to combat these villains. And sometimes they can be a bit extreme.
Sam, what are you eating?
What? It's my new diet.
Kind of looks like a bowl of sugar.
It is a bowl of sugar.
You know that's not good for you, right?
Sure it is. It's gluten-free.
Yeah, I guess technically it's gluten-free.
No fat either.
Yeah, but it's a bowl of sugar.
Organic sugar. Okay?
Alright, Dom, you heard about Sam's new diet?
I know. How good is it? The great thing is too, sugar's thousands of years old, so it fits right in with my paleo diet.
Guys, you know sugar's super bad for you, right? I mean, obesity, tooth decay, diabetes.
Oh really? I don't remember seeing anything about that on the Instagram pages I follow.
Oh, that reminds me. Hashtag clean eating. Am I right?
Whatever.
Whoa, man, do you know how much pesticide they put on apples?
Yeah, Zach, if you're not going to look after your body, I'm not sure we can be friends.
No, let's go to the solarium, Sam.
Good day.
So while this is humorous, people are actually following these diets. There's the peas diet,
The one color diet.
The model diet.
The baby food diet.
The master cleanse.
The cycle of villainization creates extremes. But gluten is only a part of that cycle for most people. Eventually, it will fade away and it will be replaced by another villain. That is why this is so much bigger than gluten.
We set out to understand the drivers behind this behavior and its implications, surveying over 170 with a survey that with more than 170 respondents, a series of interviews with nutritionists, dieters, mothers, and consumers, and multiple grocery store visits. And what we found is that 61% of Americans don't trust the medical system. We do not trust our doctors. So what do we do now when we feel ill? 80% of our respondents said that they will self-medicate, call a friend or family, or search the internet before going to the doctor. And what happens when we source our health information from the internet? We bump into applications and websites such as WebMD and its symptom checker, where you can select the symptoms that you are feeling, and WebMD will give you a myriad possible conditions that you can be suffering from which you'll choose the one that you suspect you are experiencing. We have gone from consulting the doctor to confirming our biases. And this reflects in our dietary behavior as well. When asked who they go to for diet advice, most of our respondents said that they will go to a friend, closely followed by online blogs. And today, more than ever, we have access to our own health information at the reach of our fingertips, quite literally. We track our fitness, we track our nutrition, we track our sleep, and we even track our meditation, which is the one time when we are supposed to disconnect. Because we can't control, we track. And this unique synchrony of institutional mistrust and increased access to information that allows for confirmational bias and an obsession with self-quantifying our bodies and our behavior leave us vulnerable to health and nutrition misinformation. So what do we do when we are bombarded by contradicting news every day? When one day carbs will make us fat and the next day help us lose weight? When one day butter is bad for us and the next day it is worse than olive oil but better than sugar? When one day milk is bad for our bones but it does a body good? When one day egg yolks will kill us and the next they are a superfood? Who do we trust? And marketers further this vulnerability by boasting all the possible benefits in their packaging. The mere use of the affix -free villainizes its prefix. We are left confused, anxious, and with no idea of what to eat.
So with this inundation of confusing marketing and media messaging, how do you know what to eat? How do you know that you're making a good decision and when to trust yourself? We are a constant battle between what's good, what's bad, what's safe, what's dangerous, what's healthy and unhealthy. And it's in these decisions that our choices are riddled with fear. So what we did in our research is that we went out and talked to a number of people about their health, how they approach health and dieting. And what we found is that anxiety is usually part of the decision-making process. We identified two groups, the yo-yo dieters and the perfectionists. The yo-yo dieters are the ones that have tried dieting, and they often get caught up in the cycle of trying a diet, losing weight or not, and then losing weight or not, and then gaining the weight back once they return to their regular diets. They're often filled with shame and guilt and feeling that their bodies are defective and that their pleasures are harmful. So then we went out and we talked to perfectionists, and perfectionists they know all the right things to eat. They have the right ingredients, they invested time and energy. They know exactly what's right. However, food went from a pleasure to a function. They no longer enjoy it. So even though these are two very different approaches, there's so many similarities between the two. They're anxious when making these decisions, and they're always trying to reach an ideal that can either be possible with sacrifice or somewhat feel like a moving target. And what happens when these anxious eaters become parents? And they start making the dietary decisions for their children. They pass along these habits. They consult parents that know just the right things for your child, and this leads to even more anxiety. But what happens is that we start passing this information on to our children. In fact, Common Sense Media did a study in 2015, and what they found is that 26% of 5-year-olds suggested dieting as a way to lose weight. And if that's not impactful enough, then 1 in 4 7-year-olds have tried dieting at some point or another. So not only are we perpetuating these conversations between each other and sharing this information, but we're passing this along generation after generation. We're teaching children to approach food with fear, that their eating decisions are not valid. They shouldn't trust themselves, and furthermore, they should always compare themselves to others.
So what do we do with all of this information? How can we help this group of anxious eaters empower not only themselves, but future generations? So we looked at culture today for examples of empowerment, and what we found is that increasingly we're focused on our individual and unique needs, and giving ourselves permission to remove imposed labels. We're moving from binary gender to inclusivity and allowing individuals to self-express. And we encounter bold new marketing that directly sheds the shame attached to previously unaccepted identities. Campaigns including Like a Girl by Always go viral rather, because they express our shared desire to stand up to assumptions. And finally, commercials like the one behind me by Mini Cooper featuring Serena Williams defy the labels that are often imposed on us. Whether it's the fact that you're too girly a car as the Mini Cooper, or deemed too butch when really you're a strong female athlete. In the end, we defy labels when we define ourselves. So empowerment then, in all of its forms, is a wider cultural movement of acceptance, both of ourselves and our choices. But you're probably wondering what this has to do with food. So let's think about the way that we approach eating, the questions we ask, and the statements that we say. For example, sugar is so bad for you.
Eat organic for good health.
Gluten is unhealthy.
I'm scared I'll gain weight.
If I eat that, they'll judge me.
It's easy to see how statements like these can begin to dredge up anxiety, shame, and doubt. So why then do we fixate on labels when it comes to what we eat? And why, at a time when we're embracing our individual needs, do we think that a one-size-fits-all solution will work for our dieting? We have a massive opportunity here. We can end the anxiety that engulfs our food choices. We can emphasize the value of food in our collective culture, understanding that its importance is on par with art and music in our lives, built upon deeply personal experiences. And finally, we can encourage individuals to become their own decision makers, move them away from focusing on external sources alone.
So how do we apply the bigger movement of acceptance to food? We stand together to disrupt the cycle of food villainization. We build awareness of the psychological, cultural implications of dietary extremes. And we empower consumers to make choices based on being intuitive and well-informed. We propose a shift from eating anxiety to empowered enjoyment. We are a movement that believes we should approach food with awareness and not anxiety. We will challenge media and marketing that forces us to make definitive yes and no decisions. We are bold in creating conversations that challenge the status quo, and curious because without questioning, we are vulnerable to being defined by other people's answers. We believe that healthy and sustainable decisions start with rejection of one-size-fits-all and acceptance of ourselves. We would like to introduce you to Unlabel, Eat Villain-Free. Oh, sorry. So how will we go about this? How are we going to notify the public of our ideas? We will expose the food villain cycle. We will inform people about villain-free eating, and we will reinforce well-informed and intuitive decision-making.
With Unlabel, our first step is to get people's attention and expose the issue. And we can do this with a campaign that addresses the binary messages that we get from the media. Messages about food that we've been talking about for years. Food that can be seen as both good or bad. There is a constant feed of misinformation when it comes to what is good versus bad. But we want the viewers of this campaign to look at this and ask, what is the truth? And that they can find the truth with our initiative, Unlabel. And they can do that through our website, unlabel.org. When you enter the homepage of unlabel.org, you will see a beautiful large table filled with food. But what happens if we take this food through time and apply villainizations? What if we applied the fat-free trend, then sugar-free, then low-carb, and then finally gluten-free? The table is essentially empty now. It's incomplete. What is there really left to eat? So we need to bring the food back to the table so we can eat villain-free. And we can do this if we free fat, free sugar, free carbs, and free gluten, and most importantly, free all the villains from this cycle of villainization.
Another function of the Unlabel website will be to expose the misinformation that surrounds food and nutrition. Through Unlabel's Villain Alert, we will compile and collect and curate all the binary news and articles that are coming up in the media every day. Every time that a food is deemed good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, villainized or glorified. That way we can show the ambiguity. And we will also have a literal villain alert. So when a new villain is coming up in the media, when there's a new villainizing effort, users can be aware of it and expect it before it becomes a mainstream villain.
And not only we want our users to be aware of the binary food news, but also pay attention to marketers' efforts to play on our vulnerabilities. A day doesn't go by without a new attribute on a food packaging popping up. Most of the time, we don't even know what they are. Yet, we still get scared and decide it's best if we just avoid them. This is why, with this map, we aim to create a collective villain forecasting effort. The next time you see a new villainizing label popping up on the food packaging, a new blank-free label, a new fad diet on your newsfeed, or the new villainizing binary article in the newspaper that you're reading, take a picture of it and upload it to our website. Use the hashtag gluten-free, salt-free, RBST-free to free all these so-called villains. Create a conversation before someone else turns our vulnerability into fear. And it is important to note that in this website, we are not trying to inform people about the benefits or dangers of food. We are just trying to expose them to these villainizing efforts and pay attention to the fact that we as individuals are the only ones who can make the true decisions when it comes to the food that we are eating. And in the website, the unlabeled community will not only share the information, but also share their emotions and especially anxieties regarding food. Regardless of our titles in life, we all carry labels that make us vulnerable and anxious eaters. And as a group who believes in the power of removing those labels, here today, we take the pledge to remove our labels and start eating villain-free. My name is Yasemin. I'm a yo-yo dieter.
I'm Daria.
My name is Rebecca.
My name is Shaz.
My name's Maria. I'm a label reader.
I can be such a perfectionist sometimes.
I'm an anxious eater.
I am an emotional eater.
I spend hours at the supermarket reading labels to make sure I choose the right foods for me.
Most people think that eating healthy comes easy to me.
I pledge to eat villain-free.
I pledge to eat intuitively.
I pledge to eat guilt-free.
I pledge to trust my gut when making food decisions.
I pledge.
I pledge.
I pledge.
I pledge to unlabel.
And we invite you to join us.
So now that we've begun to free ourselves of these labels, it's time for us to relearn our approach to eating intuitively. For that reason, within the Unlabeled site, we've developed 10 guidelines for eating villain-free.
Don't fall for villains.
Eat when you're hungry.
Give yourself permission.
Challenge the food noise.
Stop when you're full.
Embrace the pleasure in food.
Don't eat your feelings.
Reject one size fits all.
Get active.
Aim for progress, not perfection.
Of course, learning new behaviors can be challenging. So we've created an app that will serve as the training wheels for anyone who's interested in learning how to eat villain-free. But instead of quantifying your meals, the app will help you monitor your emotional relationship with food, while reinforcing the aforementioned guidelines and, of course, avoiding binary language. Whether it's through chats, personalized progress reports, or a handy tool that helps you visualize your journey toward balanced living.
Through Unlabel, we will expose the cycle of food villainization that has engulfed our society for the past century, empowering people to make food decisions that are driven by enjoyment and awareness, not by fear. By becoming aware, we can be equipped with healthy skepticism and curiosity to question the contradictory messaging of the media, to navigate ambiguity, and to trust our gut. Because we strive for perfection, everything feels like a failure. Binary decision-making has never done us any good. By not exploring the complexities that are right in the middle, we become vulnerable to the information that we are fed, rather than creating our own well-informed decisions. We encourage you to eat villain-free. We said that this is bigger than gluten, but this is bigger than food. Live villain-free. Thank you.
Way to go, way to go. I'm still Dr. Tom Guariella, as I was before. I have several questions, but I'm only going to ask one because
I have to say that in the process of advising this thesis group, I'm going to use a metaphor that may not be politically correct but I'm Italian, so I can use the metaphor. I use a Godfather metaphor here to kind of inform what it was like working in our group. I was Don Corleone, and Vita and Salone were Clemenza and Tessio. Two very strong leaders of opinion groups, and they were terrific. So I want to thank you publicly for the great job you did helping us in this group. The question I have for you is, so your brand is a movement, right? You're branding a movement. Can you give us an example of another movement like this one that has been successful?
I'm tempted to answer with every villain movement, although those are negative examples. But I think that the general lifestyle trend and the focus that we have on health is something that has happened in more recent years. And I wouldn't consider just SoulCycle or any of those sort of exercise activities a particular movement. But I think that overall, our trend toward healthy lifestyles and having that be something that is cool and a goal of all of ours can be considered a movement.
Great, thank you.
Hello, I am Saloni Soni, a 2014 alum and a TA for this amazing team. Great job, guys. So my question for you is that if you were to start this movement, and if you were to receive an email that made you very, very happy, who would this email be from, and what would it say?
I think it could be from any of the anxious eaters we talked about, but at least for me, I think one of the best examples would be a parent or a mother or father. One of our interviews spoke a lot about the judgment or even shame that you feel when you're comparing the way that you're raising your child. And it's so deeply personal to you because it is human that you're taking care of. So for someone to be able to shed all of the fear, shame, and anxiety that comes with that alone and follow something like this and do it confidently would be pretty awesome, I think.
And I would like to add to that question. Well, that wasn't really your question, but even though Unlabel is an hypothetical brand right now, I think we are really acknowledging what we presented today. And we took the pledge on the stage this morning. And even though this brand doesn't exist, it doesn't mean that we can't start living villain-free or eat villain-free.
Great, thanks.
I'm Vita Bates, also graduate of 2014, and I want to applaud you all for taking on an ingredient. It's very new for the program, and I love how you unpacked it and made it much bigger than that tiny little thing that's haunting all of us. What for you, I know that just watching your work changed the way that I eat, so there's power even in what you've showed us today. And I'm curious to know what, if anything, has changed for you about how you eat just in the course of the last 6 weeks.
I think that personally it's changed the way I eat completely, because what I said here is very true. We all talked about our anxieties to start with. That was one of the first conversations we had. And we found that we all had very different anxieties, but we all had anxiety. And it's completely changed the way that I think we all view food, because we would believe in these fads and these news before, and seeing them during our research made us realize what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I would also like to add, I think we talked about it a few days ago. So since we have been in a somewhat stressful in preparation for this, there was one time that me and Shaz were in the room, and I was like, I think I need water. And I drank some water, and it made me feel better. And we were like, this actually does work. So there has been so many ways, and even if it's simple, there has been so many ways that we have even been aware of our bodies during this time, and even looking at labels and how we eat in general.
And one more addition to that, we also realize that it is actually very difficult. Like, we have been immersed in this topic for the last 2 months almost, and we still find ourselves saying things like, oh, when the thesis presentation over, I'm gonna do a detox for a week, or like, I'm gonna do juicing. It is such an deeply rooted habits that we have had. It is very difficult to get rid of them. But I think we can start doing one by one, slowly.
I think for me, I'm very much more aware of what's going on in terms of fad dieting, but it's interesting to see just how much we're like questioning these days. Like, I found RBST on a package, and I was like, what is that? I texted it to all of them, and we had no idea. We had to look it up. And so we definitely are aware that there is the idea of villainization when it comes to food.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. By the power vested in me by Debbie Millman, I say we're going to take a 30-minute break, and we'll see you back here in 30 minutes.
Technology is a glittering lure, but there's the rare occasion when the public can be engaged on a level beyond flash. They have a sentimental bond with the product. My first job, I was in-house at a fur company with this old pro copywriter, Greek, named Teddy. And Teddy told me the most important idea in advertising is new. Creates an itch. You simply put your product in there as a kind of calamine lotion. But he also talked about a deeper bond with the product. Nostalgia. It's delicate, but potent. Sweetheart. Teddy told me that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound. It's a twinge in your heart, far more powerful than memory alone. This device isn't a spaceship. It's a time machine. Backwards, forwards. It takes us to a place where we ache to go again. It's not called the wheel. It's called the carousel. Travel the way a child travels. Round and around, and back home again. To a place where we know we're loved.
Nostalgia, this twinge in our hearts, this pain, is what Don Draper is using to sell this iconic Kodak product, the Carousel, in the clip we just saw. And today, this same nostalgia is what's driving most of Kodak's appearances in popular culture. It's what's currently leading Kodak and their business. And now, it's what led Spike Jonze and Opening Ceremony to license the Kodak brand for their 2015 capsule collection. The same sense of nostalgia is also what led noted film director Quentin Tarantino to shoot Hateful Eight on 70mm film and to petition major motion picture studios to keep that same film stock alive. That nostalgia is also what led Steven Spielberg to shoot Bridge of Spies on 70mm film, and what led him to wax poetic about his days as a child shooting movies on a Super 8 camera. And it's also what is now leading Kodak to re-release the Super 8 camera later this year as an updated hybrid film digital version. But nostalgia, while powerful, is also limiting. It looks backwards instead of forwards. And when we did our research, and we spoke to people and asked them what they thought about when they heard about the Kodak brand, when we said the word Kodak to them, this is what we heard.
I think about photographs from the 80s and print photography. 1970s super company, film and photography, Technicolor. Cyndi Lauper, commercial True Colors.
Kodachrome 64, one of my favorite films, also very nostalgic.
I remember anxiously waiting for the photos to come back.
This reality that people remember is quite disconnected from the reality of Kodak today. And this clarity isn't helped at all by their haphazard brand licensing efforts. In fact, the Kodak of today is a vastly different company than what most remember. Today, it is primarily a business-to-business company divided across two divisions: graphics, entertainment, and commercial films, and digital printing and enterprise. And this Kodak of today derives almost 80% of its revenue from print and print-related businesses. So it begs the question, how did this disconnect happen? How did a brand that was once so beloved, not just here in America, but across the world, get to this position where it's forced to rely on nostalgia? What happened that drove this powerful brand at once at a high in the late 90s of 92.87 down to lose almost 99% of its value and end at 36 cents in early 2012, at which point it was subsequently delisted from the New York Stock Exchange? It begs asking, how did a brand that once controlled 90% of the US film market and over 80% of the US camera market go so out of focus? How did a brand that was once the #4 brand worldwide, only behind Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and Disney, get to this current position? To truly understand what happened, we have to look all the way back to the beginning, to the founding of Kodak and to the founder of Kodak, George Eastman. Eastman was born in 1854 in Waterville, New York. At 6 years old, his father took the family and they moved to Rochester, where he planned to open a business college. Unfortunately for the family, tragedy struck soon after when his father passed. And only 8 years later, tragedy struck yet again when his sister passed away from polio-related complications. Going from successful to struggling, young George Eastman was forced to drop out of school and start working to help his struggling family. He first took jobs at an insurance company and later at a bank, where he slowly rose up the ranks. In 1878, at age 24, the seed of an idea was born when Eastman planned a trip to Santo Domingo and, desiring to document that trip, purchased a full wet plate photographic outfit, top of the line at its time. However, top of the line at that time meant the camera was as big as a microwave oven, and as George Eastman put it, the entire photographic outfit was a pack horse load's worth. At that point, his life mission was born, and he set out to simplify the photographic process and thereby photography. This decision being made, he spent the next 3 years reading, researching, and working towards the creation of gelatin dry plates. Having finally succeeded, he took his invention to London, what was then the photographic center of the world at that time. And there, in 1879, he was granted his very first patent. And upon his return to the United States a year later, he received his first US patent. Sensing a business in the making, young George Eastman went about leasing some office space in Rochester, New York, at that time, the 22nd largest city in the United States. This up-and-coming city was already home to such major corporations that we still know today, such as Bausch & Lomb, the Western Union Telegraph Company, and soon to come, the Haloid Company, which we know today as Xerox. Having secured this space, Eastman then went on to try to devise a name for his new company, his new business. Eastman was a big fan of letter K. He found it strong, he found it decisive, and when playing an anagram game with his mother, he came up with the name Kodak, a name he really liked. He saw it as extremely distinctive, and it had the added benefit of not being lost in translation in any other languages. He then went on to trademark this name, and the Eastman Kodak Company was born. This company was founded on 4 principles: focus on the customer, mass production at low cost, worldwide distribution, and extensive advertising. With the success of these 4 principles in the early days, Eastman then went on to add 3 more principles to this. Those were treat employees fairly, reinvest profits into business, and foster growth through continuing research, a major part of why Kodak rose to the prominence that it once had. Delivering on this last principle, Eastman became one of the first American industrialists to employ a full-time research scientist. This decision led to many great things for Kodak. When only a year later, Eastman and the research scientists developed the first commercially viable, flexible, transparent roll film, the precursor to the film we see in today's analog cameras. In addition, this also paved the way for the invention of Thomas Edison's motion picture camera in 1891, another major achievement. The same year that Eastman founded the company, in 1888, he also invented the first camera, aptly named the Kodak camera. This camera, priced at $25, was unfortunately unaffordable for many, equaling almost a full month's wages for the average factory worker. However, it was a vast improvement over the photographic outfit he set out with in 1878. It was portable, easy to use, carried over 100 exposures preloaded, and you could send it off to the Kodak factory, at which point they would develop your pictures and send you back the camera preloaded again. With this, he also coined the slogan, "You press the button and we do the rest," a testament to his continuing pursuit of simplification in photography. Eastman had another first when, later that year, when he instituted the very first American suggestion system, a major thing at this time. And here, behind me, is actually the very first suggestion ever made on April 8th, 1898. Now, with so many achievements under his belt, Eastman had come a long way towards achieving his 1881 goal of making photography an everyday affair, of making the camera as convenient as the pencil. And now, having almost achieved that, he went on to his next goal, attempting to make the camera as affordable as the pencil.
Although Eastman was near achieving this goal, Kodak needed to continue to work feverishly in order to make improvements and cut costs. But in 1900, they launched the Brownie camera. This camera was much cheaper than the first, and for the first time ever, it put photography at the hands of nearly everyone. And this camera proved to be a huge success, with the first 5,000 models flying off the shelves and orders piling up. And with this accessibility and popularity, it gave rise to amateur photography. By 1913, Kodak was responsible for putting cameras into the homes of nearly 1/3 of Americans, and with that, giving rise to terms such as Kodaking, Kodakers, and Kodakery. By September of 1913, Kodak released the Kodakery, the first ever amateur photography magazine, and with that, speaking directly to this community of enthusiasts and leading the photography industry. By now, Kodak needed an ad image, so Eastman hired Louis Burnell Jones to create their first, the Kodak Girl. She was a wholesome, independent young woman, but she was a mother and a wife at the same time. And by putting her at the forefront of their advertisements, it put a positive light on women everywhere during a time of women's suffrage. Eastman was also very passionate about furthering education, as he regularly gave to the Rochester Institute of Technology as well as MIT. During his time, he was said to be the third most generous man behind Rockefeller and Carnegie. In order to continue to lead photography culture, he hired C.E. Kenneth Meese to help in the development of the Cine Kodak motion picture. Meese would ultimately also help in developing new processes of color film, and eventually in 1935, the launch of Kodachrome, the first ever amateur color photography film. But Kodak did not stop there. And in 1950, they released the first in their long-running Colorama ad images that depicted a wholesome, idyllic, family-oriented version of American life. And they were the largest photographs of their time, hanging high in the east wing of Grand Central Station, where today we have the Apple Store. During its time, approximately 650,000 people saw these advertisements, and it became a popular attraction. However, at this point, Kodak was not only reaching their consumers outside of their home, they also began reaching them within.
Ozzie and Harriet are brought to you on film by Eastman Kodak Company, who also present The Ed Sullivan Show on another network. And remember,
the most personal greetings of all are photo greetings. The cards only you can send. So why not take some new pictures for your Christmas cards this week?
Kodak began sponsoring and advertising on television shows such as The Ozzie and Harriet Show, as well as The Ed Sullivan Show. And by now being part of the everyday life, it allowed Kodak to reach its new series of advertisements, the Kodak Moment. With these advertisements, Kodak became the unofficial recorder of America's moments, and it launched the term, the Kodak Moment. Expanding on this campaign, Kodak released its next series, America's Storyteller. Kodak was now not only capturing America's moments, but they were also telling their stories. And with this rise in popularity, Grammy Award-winning artist Paul Simon even wrote and released a song about one of the brand's most iconic products, Kodachrome. The song reached #2 on the Billboard charts and allowed Kodak from going to not just an iconic brand, but to also being an iconic song. And reaching their peak in the late 80s and early 90s, Kodak employed 145,000 employees worldwide, owned 19,000 patents, and had a revenue of $16 billion. But even though the company was now worth $35 billion and seemingly on top of the world, there were cracks in the facade as the company culture began to decline. Kodak began to act as security seekers rather than the risk takers they once were, and they became comfortable where they were at, a mentality that would later be referred to as the Rochester mentality. And as Kodak was declining, the name Silicon Valley became part of our vernacular in the early 90s with the introduction of IBM PCs and other hardware and software products.
Trapped in the comfort zone, the management didn't even listen when Steve Sasson, one of Kodak's employees, invented the digital camera in 1975. But when he showed it to them, they told him to take the box and go away. They didn't want to see him again. Kodak was blinded by the profits generated by its film business and rejected all the predictions, endangering its success. Kodak missed again, passing on sponsorship for 1984 Los Angeles Olympic Games, an opportunity that Fujifilm, Kodak's biggest competitor at that time, eagerly accepted. In the late 1980s, Fuji opened a manufacturing plant in the US and was able to sell mass-produced film to large retailers like Walmart for a price less than Kodak's film. Therefore, Fuji has been able to reduce Kodak's US market share by about 2% per year. While the battle for film was heating up, Kodak hired Faith Popcorn, one of the most influential trend forecasters, to predict the future of film. She warned them that the future of film was digital and advised them to go into digital instead of print. Despite her warning, Kodak rejected the idea of abandoning film and dismissed her like they did with Steve Sasson. They even downplayed George Eastman's warning, who in 1926 told Kodak's managers that the world is moving and a company that contents itself with present accomplishments soon falls behind. And here is the continuing evidence of Kodak falling behind. Despite the fact that it was Kodak who originally invented the digital camera, Fujifilm developed their own camera in 1988, 12 years after Kodak did, and a year after introduced it to the market. This grants Fuji's DSX the title of the first digital camera, commercially produced digital camera. What was predicted soon became reality. Digital started surpassing the analog, sales of film were dropping, until there was only a tiny minority left interested in analog cameras. The entire film photography industry was suffering, so it wasn't a problem exclusive to Kodak. Nevertheless, other brands like Fujifilm managed to adapt to the changing landscape and diversified by making a transition away from film into the new lines of business. At the same time, Kodak relied heavily on their brand name and marketing and thought that the company could buy its way into the new industries. Kodak didn't expect they had a pattern of failures ahead of them. In 1988, Kodak entered a bidding war and overpaid for the acquisition of Sterling Drug to enter the pharmaceutical industry. Yet it only took 6 years for them to realize that it wasn't a good fit, so they sold it off in pieces for $500 million less. In 2004, Kodak sold its remote sensing systems unit, which had customers like NASA and other US government agencies, as well as aerospace and defense companies. All these bad decisions led to the last Kodak moment, and in 2012, the company filed for bankruptcy. As a result, Kodak was forced to sell their photo sharing platform called Kodak Gallery to Shutterfly. What's interesting, that same year, Facebook acquired Instagram for $1 billion, which had around 30 million users at that time. In contrast, Kodak Gallery had 75 million users. In an effort to rescue the company, in 2013, Kodak started selling a part of their patent portfolio. The sale included 1,100 digital imaging patents, and the buyer was a consortium of the world's largest tech companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, and Samsung. Thanks to that, the company managed to survive. So a company that once invented photography for the masses and technology for mobile phone photography transferred itself into a commercial printing and packaging firm. Led by the former HP CEO, the company focused on what they were saying they knew best, and they welcome us to the next 2,000 years of print. Now, why not go back to Kodak's heritage and focus on cameras? Well, the answer is simple. We all have all-in-one devices in our pockets now. What digital did to analog photography, smartphones did to digital cameras. Phones are today being advertised for their cameras, which offer 600 to 800 times higher resolution than the original Kodak camera. They're convenient and allow us to share pictures on the go. We live in the age of ubiquitous connectivity and oversharing, with 2 billion pictures uploaded to Facebook daily and 80 million pictures uploaded to Instagram daily. Although the medium has evolved from Facebook to YouTube to Instagram to Snapchat, which is ephemeral in nature and where pictures last for 3 seconds, the desire and drive for sharing and storytelling has remained. Going back to cave paintings in 30,000 BC, the communication was evolving due to the desire to leave the mark and connect with people. Going to to the 3rd millennium BC, where clay tablets served as documents for sharing information. As technology advanced, Gutenberg's printing press initiated a print revolution, and in 1991, the World Wide Web went live. Since the cave paintings were discovered, telling stories has been one of our most fundamental communication methods. When we hear a story, our brain perceives the information differently rather than just processing language. It activates all parts of our brain because stories connect with our emotions and our personal experiences. Stories keep our imagination alive. We've moved from passive documenting to active sharing, from capturing moments to elevating experiences. Therefore, Kodak must regain its cultural relevance by advancing from a single-minded brand that solely captures moments to a multifaceted one that promotes meaningful and momentous experiences.
We introduce you to the new Kodak, a technology and innovation company rooted in imaging, sustained by imagination, and driven by storytelling. The future in focus. With the Future in Focus strategy, we aim to shift the perception of the Kodak brand from one that is out of pace with culture to one that influences culture. We aim to be whenever and wherever the conversation of innovation is taking place, and we aim to get on the radar of the public once again. We will take Kodak beyond product and connect it to a higher purpose. We've reorganized Kodak into 3 business divisions: Kodak Laboratories, Kodak Moments, and Kodak Develops. We have also created a new visual identity system inspired by the Kodak of the 1970s. Kodak Laboratories exists to foster a company culture of innovation, curiosity, and collaboration. One of Kodak's most valuable assets is its patent portfolio of 7,000 patents, many of which are untapped and ripe for product development. And it has never been more important for companies to continue to be innovative, and it has never been more difficult. Companies across all sectors are now investing in innovation labs to cultivate a startup mentality, which is why we introduce you to CoLabs. This is a space where Kodak employees are able and encouraged to exercise curiosity and experimentation and take risks so that it never misses a key game-changing moment again. CoLabs will also be self-funding. Startup companies will be able to rent the facilities and have access to patents. The first CoLab space will be in Austin, Texas, a city poised to become the next Silicon Valley, with 5,400 startups and $900 million invested since 2015. The second CoLab space will be right here in New York City, taking advantage of the $7.3 billion New York State has invested in the startup economy. CoLabs will also live as an online platform, giving access to knowledge and patents to a wide-reaching audience of aspiring innovators. These aspiring innovators will be able to partake in challenges featuring Kodak patents. And it will create a global community of collaborators. Kodak Laboratories will also host Kodakathons. These are competitions held in college campuses across the country. They will give the opportunity for young, bright minds to have access to patents and facilities so they can create the next breakthrough technologies. And keeping in mind that this generation is constantly connected to their cell phones, we will advertise on the ground, quite literally. Partnering with Blipper, the popular augmented reality platform, simply hovering your cell phone over the ad will allow you to automatically register, as well as upload the podcast, Kodakery. Kodakery is building upon Kodak's existing podcast, which now features motion and picture film. However, we will be expanding it to be a podcast about science and technology, showcasing the outputs of collabs and Kodakathons. However, what is the purpose of all of this innovation and technology if we don't use it to elevate the human experience? Through Kodak Moments, we will harness technology and reframe the Kodak moment term for our time. Through the outputs of Kodak Moments, we will spark a new connection with a new generation, immersing them in the Kodak story, because stories that surround you engage you. With this in mind, we have revived and reimagined the Kodak Carousel. The new Kodak Carousel is a physical space, an interactive space that travels from city to city. It is constructed of transparent, flexible OLED display screens, a technology that Kodak invented. And when the carousel comes to town, you will know, because a Snapchat geofilter will be implemented within a 100-mile radius. And you'll be able to see your videos and your photos displayed on the carousel's rotating collage. This is a collective story of every community that the Kodak Carousel travels to. But not everything about the carousel has changed. It is still a time machine that can take you backwards and forwards. It can take you back in time to 1950s New York, where this Colorama ad was taken, to the sights and the sounds. But it's not just taking you back. It can take you forward. It can give you a peek into the future.
The center of the Kodak Carousel will be used to showcase current Kodak products such as the Super 8, as well as selected output out of the collabs. One idea that we see being born out of the collaboration of inspiring innovators and Kodak professionals will be Kodak. Kodak is a smart food safety labeling system. Knowing that the global food safety testing market is anticipated to surpass 16 billion by 2020 with an expected growth rate of 6.7%, this is an opportunity for Kodak to set its strategy and expand into this new market. And food safety is a global issue, with 1 in 10 people falling ill annually and with 425,000 people dying from it as a result. African and Southeast Asian regions are especially burdened with food-related diseases, with children below of the age 5 being at a particular risk of falling ill, with 125,000 children dying from it. Kodak will create these electronically printed labels by merging its extensive experience in material science technology with its expertise in printing and its 20 years of experience in packaging. These labels will provide our consumer with information on 3 levels. It will inform them if the product was stored at the right temperature. It will give information about the quality of the product, and it also will warn if its date has expired. This is a flexible system, and it can be applied and customized for almost any product, ranging from dairy produce to meat and meat products. And in order to ensure that also our audience is informed about all the efforts we're making, we go back to George Eastman's belief that a good reputation is measured by how much you can improve the life of others. Creating the tagline "Smart Tags for Brilliant Smiles," ensuring that we get on the radar and inform the public about our efforts around applying science to food. This is an ad that will live in the public space in order to reach as many people as possible. George Eastman once said that the progress of the world depends entirely upon education. Inspired by this quote, our last and third segment will focus on education and creating a better future for today's youth. We want to democratize education the same way how we once democratized photography. This segment will be financed through the Eastman Kodak Foundation in memory on the philanthropic efforts of our founder. This foundation will support numerous educational initiatives. However, since we know that 57% of graduates in the United States are female, however, they only represent 18% in computer science and 18% in engineering. And knowing that these underrepresentation of women in these fields stems from gender stereotypes that are placed onto girls and boys at an early age, we will focus with our first initiative on women. Once again putting a focus on girls, the same way we did it almost 100 years ago with our first ad campaign, Kodak Girls. It featured a young and adventurous woman who was out to explore the world. Presenting Kodak Girls. Kodak Girls seeks to expose young girls to science, technology, engineering, and math, also known as the STEM fields. We want to fight against the existing stereotypes and also promote diversity by creating the tagline, "Imagination has no gender." This is an ad campaign that will live online as well as in print, and it will invite people in to join the conversation using the hashtag Girls in Focus. Part of this initiative of Kodak Girls will also be hands-on workshops and activities, which aim towards showing the fun and the creativity behind science and tech. They will be led by Kodak female professionals and take place at either the collabs in Austin or New York, or at our main headquarters in Rochester. The goal of this is to establish a conversation between female leaders in the tech fields and young girls at an early age in order to inspire them to pursue careers within the STEM fields, and hopefully inspiring them to one day work for a company like Kodak. Going back, we learned today that Kodak was a company who always had a focus forward, and we believe that through the implementation of our new brand strategy, it will allow us to regain Kodak's cultural relevance and return into the minds and hearts of the Kodak consumer.
Technology, driven by limitless imagination, is a force that changed and is still changing the face and fate of humanity. It is propelling human progress, changing human communication, and fostering new means of connection. Yes, nostalgia is potent, but it limits, lessening possibility. Let's make positive new associations, respecting what we've done and where we've been. Let's move forward, creating a new future for Kodak. Harnessing technology and innovation, storytelling via imaging, and sparking imagination for all. Let's bring the future into focus. Welcome to the next 2,000 years of Kodak.
Well done, guys. That was great. Really great.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Scheer. I'm one of the founding faculty members of this program and have had the privilege of being an advisor for the Kodak team. And of course, I have a question, which is a little longer than I'd like, so I'm going to read a little bit of it if I can. You've talked a lot today about this notion of building communities and Kodak's role, and you've shown some wonderful imagery of iconic community building things like the cave paintings in Lascaux, and of course Dan Draper's Mad Men clip with the carousel and its ability to, as he says, take us to a place we ache to go again, which I absolutely love. Take us to a place we ache to go again. And while you guys have been busy with the development of your thesis, the country has begun to ache in cities all over the country, and of course Dallas being the most recent. And you've done a wonderful job of building some applications for the development of social communities. My question is, do you think that Kodak's technology could be used for building connections for civic communities rather than just social communities, and allow communities to begin to have a tool for healing? And if so, could Kodak do that? I suppose I do have two questions. Could Kodak do that? And if they could do that, what would that tool look like, do you think?
I suppose that it probably would be possible for Kodak's technology to do, especially looking at some of some of the tactics that we rolled out. We think that education plays a strong component in not just building communities, but connecting people and also expanding their minds and mindset. And if even just the Kodak Develops initiative goes forward, and the Eastman Kodak Foundation went forward, then we think that could be a definite forward positive step towards connecting people, maybe even helping to heal some divisions and get past some ignorance that people have due to lack of.
Do you think the carousel could be used for something like that?
I was just going to add to that. So the carousel, the outside collage, it's all about collecting stories of different perspectives in different communities of different economic, social backgrounds. So when you have, well, the intent as well with the collage is to have a singular place where we can gather all of these photos and videos to show the diversity of the country. And so Kodak at the center of that is a way for us to really see that in all of our differences and our perceptions, we all have this unique to human desire to leave a mark on our time and to tell our own personal story. So the Kodak is inclusive of hearing different perspectives. So I definitely believe that Kodak can be part of a civic movement.
Richard asks hard questions. Mine will be easier. My name is Tosh Hall. I'm an instructor and also a thesis advisor. Been torturing these guys for a while. It was well done. Excellent presentation. Very nice. My question is only if half of the business right now is in print and the nostalgia and analog kind of rise of the beginning of your presentation. What role do you think print and analog plays as the future of Kodak? You painted a brilliant picture for. What do we do with the current print and analog portfolio? Does that play a role in the future? How does it evolve? Where do we take it?
So print is a term that is actually expanded in meaning over the last few years, I guess decades, years. So print isn't just on paper, it's 3D printing, it's various kinds of imaging as well for Kodak. So that is definitely integral to what we plan to do moving forward. It's just about reimagining what print is, going beyond paper, and really knowing that it can be applied for practical purposes like Kodak's, which is print.
Excellent.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
This is it. Welcome to MTV Music Television, the world's first 24-hour stereo video music channel.
When it launched in 1981, MTV was like nothing else on television. It was gritty, it was raw. It was for people obsessed with music. MTV gave people a new way to experience music and performances that had previously been isolated to radio waves, television specials, and live concerts. But what made MTV something people wanted? Let's take a look at what the world looked like back then. In post-World War II America, suburban neighborhoods looked like this. But music community icons looked like this. Families on television sang to us and looked like this. And long-haired bands sang us power ballads. But at the same time, the genres of punk, pop, and rock emerged with new energy and a sense of rebellion. The youth of the 1980s rallied behind this rebellion, and they found common ground in dance, music, and art. The time was perfect for MTV. A small group of television executives had been testing music videos in a television series called Pop Clips. John Lack, one of those television executives, who would go on to be MTV's first chief operating officer, recalled the phones ringing off the hook with every Pop Clips airing. He was determined to bring music videos to a 24-hour music television show. Despite repeated rejections from television networks, the team took a risk, and on August 1st of 1981, MTV made history. MTV was an immediate success among the youth generation. Conan O'Brien, the comedian, recalls, "We watched for 6 hours. It's something you can't describe to anyone younger than you. It was like a comet streaking across the sky."
Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac said, "I would sit on the end of my bed, watching video after video, stupefied."
Dave Grohl, drummer of Nirvana, said, "It seemed like a transmission from some magical place. You would go to a friend's house before going out to a party, and you would have MTV."
Nancy Wilson of the band Heart said, "Everybody wanted their MTV. I remember craving it like crazy."
That craving expanded beyond just the youth sentiment. MTV made use of it and created the I Want My MTV campaign, asking people to call their cable companies and carry the channel. MTV was also strengthened by the explosion of cable in the 1980s, beginning with just 28% coverage in United States household, expanding to 79% coverage in just 9 years. With the VJs as the face of the channel, they exposed viewers to new artists, new bands, and new directors launching their careers. Like Madonna with her defining song Like a Virgin, and her performance of the same rolling around on stage at the very first MTV Video Music Awards. And at a later VMAs with Prince and his performance and genre-bending new sounds. And of course, Michael Jackson's release of Thriller. This 14-minute video released exclusively on MTV blurred the lines between music video and narrative film. Directed by John Landis, Thriller gave MTV the legitimacy of critical acclaim for the first time. Perhaps most notable of MTV's early influences was the television show Yo! MTV Raps in 1988. A recent article from Wax Poetics magazine said of Yo beamed future stars of rap and hip hop into living rooms like never before. MTV was not only a place for music that was new, but also of news. When Kurt Loder announced the death of Kurt Cobain in 1994, it devastated fans. But at the same time, it secured MTV's foothold as the go-to destination for news.
Now let's look at what MTV looks like today.
Do you see these cameras right here? Do you want to watch yourself acting like this?
I didn't choose to get pregnant at this age, Mom. I didn't plan it.
You're not ready to be a father. You're not even ready to be an adult.
It's like we got drunk, had an uh-oh, and now we have a big uh-oh.
Oh my God.
It's gonna be okay, honey. Oh my God, that felt amazing.
This burr?
Yeah.
This is a love triangle like we've never seen before.
Nervous.
It still could be anyone.
Shaking.
You're pushing me to a level of insanity.
Don't wave that knife around while you're talking to me.
These cameras are going to show you. The entire world is going to see you acting like this.
Wow, right? MTV has changed dramatically. It's no longer a place you go to see an artist for the first time or to watch somebody launch their career. Now it's a place more geared towards reality television, vulgar behavior, and people doing foolish things to make money. And now, with music only playing in the middle of the night when people are sleeping, it's almost completely lost its ties to music, the original thing it stood for. And this wasn't better signified than in 2010, when MTV changed its logo from this, MTV Music Television, to this, simply MTV, with no explanation for what the M stood for anymore, or what the brand stood for anymore. And all these changes have contributed to some business problems that the brand is seeing. According to Nielsen data, 40% of MTV's viewership has gone down since 2010. And on top of that, ad revenue has gone down 20%, according to SNL Kagan, between 2013 and 2015.
So how did MTV get here? Well, let's take a look back to the 90s that began with the introduction of a new genre of television with The Real World. This groundbreaking new format
One atomic bomb did this to a city and its people. Even the most ruthless aggressors of the past had no such weapon. A soldier of Alexander with one spear killed one. Napoleon's cannon in one firing killed 12. The Kaiser's Big Bertha killed 88. Hitler's B-2 killed 168. Japan's war against the United States ended after a B-29 dropped one atomic bomb that killed close to 100,000.
As humans evolve, so do our weapons. We went from one spear that could kill one person to a bomb that could kill 100,000. How did we get here? Is it because as humans we're wired for violence and conflict and war? Is that what drove the creation of nuclear weapons? Or was it something else? The origins of nuclear weapons aren't actually rooted in fear or violence and hate, but in the quest for knowledge and scientific exploration. Marie Curie discovered radium and polonium in 1898, the two chemical elements that would lay the foundation for a nuclear reaction. Building on her body of work, in 1938, a team of scientists discovered nuclear fission, the process by which an atom is split into two lighter atoms, releasing an enormous, explosive amount of energy. Now, both of these discoveries are seen as huge advances in both the medical and scientific communities, but they also make it possible to create nuclear weapons. Now, fast forward a couple years to 1942. World War II is underway, and a team of scientists are being recruited to work on the Manhattan Project, a top-secret, government-led initiative to create the world's first atomic bomb. Now, this is the first time that this kind of science, nuclear physics, is being used for the purpose of war. But remember, at this point in our country's history, nationalism is at an all-time high. People are willing to do whatever they can to contribute to the war effort, because winning the war means ending the war. So people don't question the government. They don't question top-secret projects, because if we can win the war, we can end the war, and we might have a chance of actually achieving peace. So the government continues to recruit scientists and civilians to work on this top-secret project, and many of them have no idea what they're actually contributing to, just like the women in this picture. And none of them were prepared for what would happen next.
On August 6, 1945, the secret of the Manhattan Project was revealed. One bomb destroyed a city and shook the world. In its wake, we were left with fear.
And it was this fear from one bomb. This fear would define global politics for decades to come. Out of the war, allies became enemies as we entered the Cold War. But rather than putting down our weapons, we began to build more of them. Even our beloved John F. Kennedy felt that we needed to rely on nuclear weapons. As he said, "We dare not tempt them with weakness. For only when our arms are sufficient beyond doubt can we be certain beyond doubt that they will never be employed." The Russians felt similarly. Their leader, Nikita Khrushchev, said, "If you start throwing hedgehogs under me, I shall throw a couple of porcupines under you." And it was this fear and this rhetoric that led to the nuclear arms race. Both countries started to build insane numbers of nuclear warheads. The graph behind me shows you how many warheads each country had over the course of the Cold War. At its height, the United States had over 30,000 nuclear warheads. The Soviets had over 40,000. And this staggering number of nuclear warheads increased the chance that we were going to enter a nuclear war. And the public was not happy about this. So at the time, a fringe movement that had previously existed to oppose war bubbled to the mainstream as people came together to protest nuclear weapons and call for their disarmament.
In 1958, Gerald Holtom designed a symbol for nuclear disarmament. He used the N and the D in a flag alphabet to create what we now know as the peace symbol. And people rallied behind this symbol. They fought actively against nuclear weapons, and they created a movement. We then saw people like John Lennon writing songs about imagining a peaceful world.
As the Cold War went on, real wars started to bubble up on the ground, like the one in Vietnam. And this movement that had existed protesting nuclear weapons started to turn their attention to these wars. So this symbol specifically for nuclear disarmament, took on this broader meaning for peace, for which we now know it. Vietnam was just one of many proxy wars. These were wars in places like Southeast Asia that were financed on either side by the Americans and the Soviets. The Americans financed the capitalists, and the Soviets financed the communists. This was a way for the two countries to fight each other without using their own militaries and without using nuclear weapons.
But the fall of the Berlin Wall marked an end to the Cold War and the perception of nuclear threat. So much so that the next generation's first encounter with these weapons was in the consumption of sugar. This generation grew up to watch one of their beloved characters, Homer Simpson, go to work every day and try to prevent a nuclear catastrophe. And were delighted when the villain of the decade, Dr. Evil, incorporated these weapons in his diabolical plot for global domination.
But the humor ended on September 11th, 2001, when terrorists attacked the United States and crashed two twin commercial airliners into the World Trade Center. Our security was shattered, and the playful irreverence of the 90s was replaced with fear.
This fear sparked the war on terror, which is still ongoing today. And since that time, there's only been one allusion to nuclear weapons. When the Bush administration successfully rebranded this fear into a fear of weapons of mass destruction. This has been the only instance in a time of global chaos that the threat of nuclear weapons has been in the minds of the American public.
But we continue to live in a state of chaos, and nuclear threat remains a concern. Kim Jong-un states, "If we push buttons to annihilate the enemies, they will be reduced to seas of flames and ashes in a moment." Donald Trump, what good does it do to have a good nuclear triad if you're afraid to use it? And Vladimir Putin, I want to remind you that Russia is one of the world's most powerful nuclear nations. ISIS is currently seeking enough nuclear material to kill as many people as possible. What would happen if just one of these people were to drop a bomb? To make this feel a little bit more realistic, we've used the very theater in which you sit today as our target to simulate this experience. Upon impact, a fireball, a luminous mass of gas and air would emanate from the explosion, incinerating the ground around us and resulting in the iconic mushroom cloud. Simultaneously, an air blast would destroy concrete structures and buildings around us, shooting dust into the air. Radiation ensues, resulting in third-degree burns and surely many fatalities. Simultaneously, the air blast continues, knocking over cars, overturning other structures, pulling down power lines, fires erupt, and thermal radiation continues to emit from the epicenter, moving into New Jersey, into upstate New York. Estimated fatalities numbered around 300,000, and injuries at nearly twice that number, at 590,000. You've now just witnessed the potential impact of just one of these bombs. I'd like you to now think about the fact that we still have 15,000 nuclear warheads worldwide.
So where is the urgency? Where is the action and the concern? Today we are bombarded with issues and problems. What's going to happen now that the UK is no longer in the EU? What's going to happen with the Zika virus and with our growing student debt? It's hard for us to focus on just one problem at a time, and nuclear security has a lot of competition for our attention. So we polled over 200 people to get an idea of what kind of problems they are concerned about. And we can see that economic inequality and climate change are at the top of their list, but nuclear security falls to their very bottom. So how can they be concerned if they don't understand the threat?
How many nuclear weapons do you think the whole world has right now?
The whole world.
I hear it's a lot. A few hundred.
I have no idea.
Right. I said 7.
Oh, I thought you said 70.
No, I said 7.
Oh, well, yeah, one for each time. That makes sense. All right, I'll go with 7.
I don't have no idea.
Like 10?
I think more.
We have over 15,000 nuclear warheads.
15,000?
Why?
So we can see that when we confront them with the facts, their concern does grow. And when we think back to the 60s and the 70s, we remember young people actively rallying against nuclear war. And we thought to ourselves, how can we reignite the peace movement? What we're seeing now with activism is actually what we're calling slacktivism. When we retweet, when we hashtag, when we share and cover our Facebook profile pictures with flags, we're not necessarily acting, but we're just showing intention. And what we have to do is we have to take that intention and move it into action.
A good way of moving intention into action is through integrating this subject into popular culture. But every time it seems to be shrouded in jokes and stereotypes, like the movie displayed behind me. And we've even gone so far as to coin the phrase going nuclear, meaning to play an end game or to go too far. However, sometimes going too far and using humor can be a very effective strategy at getting to the heart of an issue.
Nowadays, we spend less time worrying about nuclear annihilation than we do worrying about whether we accidentally hit reply all on an office email. They are currently in silos in Wyoming, Montana, and North Dakota. And let's start with Wyoming. How well are we taking care of these things?
Take this enormous outer door designed to protect the corridor leading to the capsule. They can't close it because of a broken part, so it's propped open with a crowbar. The equipment is ancient. This, for example, is one of the computers that would receive a launch order from the president. It uses floppy disks, the really old, big ones.
Holy 17 Air Force officers are being relieved of their duties controlling nuclear missiles.
An inspection in March tested the group's missile launch proficiency. They were rated as marginal, the equivalent of earning a D grade, barely passing.
That's not great. Over the years, America has had some pretty terrifying almost-geddons.
The Goldsboro incident of 1961. That's when a U.S. B-52 bomber jet broke in half during a flight and lost its load, 2 nuclear bombs. Where was it flying at the time? Over the city of Goldsboro, North Carolina. Both bombs plummeted to the ground. One was nearly armed, set to explode, but miraculously, neither did.
Yeah, you dropped an armed nuclear bomb on your own country.
Someone dropped a socket in the silo, and the socket fell about 70 feet, pierced the missile, caused a fuel leak, and then there was a huge explosion.
Just think about the system we have designed. In the rock, paper, scissors logic, socket beats nuclear missile.
6 nuclear-tipped cruise missiles were loaded onto a B-52 by mistake, flown across the country, and left unguarded on the tarmac. no one noticed for 36 hours.
How can we achieve global security when we've hardly achieved domestic security?
How can we prevent nuclear accidents from happening?
How can we secure our aging nuclear arsenal?
How can we keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of terrorists?
How can we keep nuclear secrets in the information age?
Can we make sure that Iran complies with the new nuclear deal?
How do we protect the South China Sea region from North Korean nukes?
How do we secure the materials of nuclear weapons globally?
We've faced many challenges to achieve security. But is achieving nuclear security simply impossible? Well, we've accomplished the impossible before. We've accomplished the impossible when the Wright brothers launched the first flight at Kitty Hawk in 1903. And we've accomplished the impossible when Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay ascended Everest. We've accomplished the impossible when Roger Bannister proved that it was indeed physically possible for the human body to run fast enough to break the 4-minute mile. And Neil Armstrong accomplished the impossible when he took his first steps on the moon in 1969. And just as recently as this past month, NASA has accomplished the impossible by sending Juno into orbit around Jupiter.
In order to achieve these impossible feats, we had to start first by expanding our idea of what is possible. And what is possible, really, but a concept that we hold in our heads? The possible is just a set of capabilities or knowledge that we have, things that are within our grasp. But beyond the possible is the adjacent possible. These are things that we don't exactly know how to do yet, but we can conceive of. For example, self-driving cars. We haven't completely got it figured out yet, but we know it is possible and we can imagine it. But beyond these adjacent possibles is the impossible. But this is misleading. These things aren't necessarily impossible, we just don't know how to do them yet. And as our knowledge and capabilities grow, the possible grows. And with it, the adjacent possible. So when a man is able to walk on the moon, sending a satellite to Jupiter does not seem that impossible. And as the possible grows and our adjacent possible grows, the number of things that seem impossible to us begin to shrink. And as Albert Einstein said, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them.
The fact is, young people today want to make a difference. But to do this, they need a clear understanding of the problem or issue and clearly articulated outlets for action. So we envision a brand that can wake the world up to nuclear threat and imagine new paths to peace.
There are enough nuclear weapons today to destroy the world multiple times over.
There's a good chance one is pointed at your city. We are all targets.
We've lived under the nuclear threat for 70 years. It's time to address that threat.
Policymakers and security experts haven't solved this problem. It's time to bring new minds to the challenge.
Let's wake the world up to nuclear threat and come together to imagine new paths to peace. Introducing Lucid, an organization that reimagines what nuclear activism could look like in the 21st century. And just as our brand aims to deconstruct our current relationship with nuclear weapons, we wanted our visual identity to convey the same goal. So you'll notice that our logo is actually a deconstructed version of the peace symbol. And in its current form, it represents two ideas. The first is this idea of peace and the type of future that we wish to achieve. The second is this idea of a target, which represents our current nuclear threat and reality. This brings us to our tagline, "We are all targets." This line is a direct acknowledgement of the intimacy of this problem, because this isn't some distant, abstract concept. Nuclear threat is very real, it's very serious, and it affects us all.
There are two parts to Lucid, our digital content and our external events and experiences. Let's have a look at our digital content. Knowing that activism today lives mainly online, our digital content comes on our website. For example, radio activism.
it is a new podcast that we intend to start that facilitates decision-making from the listeners. So, for example, you can listen to a podcast about the policy of first use. Once you listen to this and you have all the information, you make a decision. Do you want to enforce or not enforce the policy? Once you make your choice, you can listen to the corresponding podcast and then listen to the effects of that decision.
And just as important as having digital and online content, we would like Lucid to also have tangible ways for the public to engage with this material through live events and experiences. Looking to the past to inspire the future, we want to bring the history of nuclear security to life, and we envision partnerships with museums and cultural institutions where the public can come and engage with the information through a range of multimedia and interactive displays, touchscreens, holograms, possibly VR technology, so they can not only become informed citizens, but informed decision makers as well.
In addition to partnering with museums, we'll also partner with universities. We're calling this initiative Creative Alliances. Why is it that only policymakers talk about nuclear security? What would it look like if an artist, a writer, a poet, a scientist, an engineer, or a philosopher approached the problem of nuclear security? And what would it look like if they approached this problem together? Creative Alliances attempts to do this by bringing all these different disciplines together in universities to come up with new, innovative collaborations towards creative problem solving.
And lastly, in addition to our digital content and experiences, we'd like to distribute our symbol to any and all people that are interested and ask them to put them on places that they love, the people that they love, and even their pets, so that the world is exposed to the nuclear vulnerability that we all face.
Now, we see this as a movement that extends beyond the Lucid brand. So in addition to engaging with our digital content and attending our events, we hope that people can find a way to show their support in their own way. So this could be through creating street art or body art, writing music or poetry. We want people to feel like this is an issue that they can take into their own hands. We've also designed the logo and tagline so that it can translate into different languages and cultures so that people all over the world can show their support for this movement, and we can come together as a global community around this global issue that affects us all. Ultimately, we seek to create a new mindset, one where we are not confined by what we do know, but empowered and inspired by what we don't know yet, and the possibility of achieving the impossible. Because many people still believe that it's impossible that they could be a target of a nuclear bomb, that they could be a target of nuclear threat. But Lucid is here to wake people up and spread awareness that we are all vulnerable to nuclear threat, and we are all targets.
Some things that will make some of you feel a bit uncomfortable.
Oh, have I got your attention now?
How do you feel?
Pretty good.
Good. Hold on. I want to capture the
Targeted.
I am Dan. This is Mark. I'm Dan Formosa. I'm part of the founding faculty, and not only the faculty, but one of the thesis advisors with the other people with me who will introduce themselves. So, I have several questions. One is your solution is to develop a brand, an entity called Lucid. Can you spark a movement with a brand or do you need a person to spark a movement? If you look back in history, it's been people who have sparked movements. So what are your thoughts about people sparking movements as opposed to the brand that you're creating?
Well, we have a president that is about to be leaving office that has been very proactive in non-proliferation and eliminating these weapons. And he's not going to be as busy as he is right now in a few short months, so perhaps he would be a good fit.
Okay. Great. And the second thing is, let's say you're moving forward. Take a couple of days off, right? You wake up Monday morning. What do you do? How do you start?
I think the first thing that we would probably do is print those stickers for a couple reasons. One, because it's a really simple, easy thing to do, but it also gets to your first question, which is these movements really only work if we put them in the hands of people. So this was, of our tactics that we showed you here, it's the most tangible and the one that we can kind of get off the ground tomorrow and empower people, put it in their hands so it can truly become a movement.
I agree with Anu, and I think the nice thing about the stickers and the target is that this is a symbol that's already recognizable. It already has some emotions connected to it, so without knowing anything about the movement or the issue, you could kind of already have an idea of what it means and what it stands for.
So you're starting as some sort of underground movement, street art. Okay, great. Third and last comment, I noticed you had some very interesting and very emotional black and white footage and black and white images. And you're all wearing black, white, and gray, so nice touch.
Hello, my name is Sam Develard, founding faculty member, and I teach cultural analysis and trend forecasting and how to look into the future. And now the question. What do you consider to be, you spoke about young people, right? That's your target audience, right? The youngsters, millennials, Gen Zs, right? What do you consider are the main psychological obstacles, so obstacles in the mindset that make it so difficult for them to being aware of the nuclear threat? Plus, how do you see your suggestions, your recommendations, targeting that mental blockage? So first definition of mental blockage and then how.
So we spoke about a couple of them. I think the number one, particularly when it comes to awareness, is this idea of slacktivism and kind of people's knowledge. There's all these issues going on, and one of the hardest things is to have these movements and to address social issues, you can't just be aware of them. With that awareness, people need an outlet for action. So that was something that was really intentional for us, that we didn't want this to just be an education campaign. If you tell people a lot about a problem, you'll scare them and you'll get them excited, but they don't necessarily know what to do on their own, which is why giving people tangible outlets for coming together and collaborating is really important towards addressing that psychological block.
Can I ask something connected to that? So what was it about then the late 60s?
Yeah, so I think the physical protesting in the streets at the time was seen as an outlet for action. So for that generation, this was a specific way to act. Today, some people may be skeptical that that sort of physical protesting is actually effective. And even if you do, there needs to be other forms because, as we said, most of this activism is online. So many of these things are not necessarily different, they're not necessarily new. It's not that there wasn't action before, but people have lost sight of that. So because it's old, people don't see this as a form of action. They need something novel to be able to get them excited about it.
Good. So an obstacle would be the need for novelty. Bravo.
Hi, my name is Billy Burke, and I am a graduate of the class of 2012. So with this matter being such a global issue, how do you envision activating your strategy outside of the US? And what would be the first steps you take that differ from the first steps you take within the US borders?
I feel like the first steps that we would take to make this initiative international would probably result around a combination of tangible, tactile sticker release methods, but also would involve digital content. These are digital natives, and platforms like Instagram and Snapchat are highly popular, and they're all over. They're global. So we would probably do some sort of internet bomb tagging or some to release the message using our logo. But additionally, I get curious about the thought of the sharing economy and the fact that boundaries and borders are sort of becoming gray. And in order to make this, it seems like it's almost set up to become international just as boundaries are starting to dissolve and people really consider them, or the younger generations in particular, consider themselves to be part of a global community, that the movement can really take off and transcend boundaries and borders rather quickly.
Great answer.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. I take it that no one's hungry at this point. We are very excited to present Volkswagen to you this afternoon. And the sound you heard was that of a combustion engine. And as we went on this amazing journey with this brand, we came across the following quote: "Before the internal combustion engine, the world was a quiet place. It was a very different place." And so as we go through this thesis, we'd like you to kind of think about what that means in the context of Volkswagen.
The internal combustion engine. The engine works in 4 stages. First, a valve opens and the piston lowers, letting a mixture of fuel and air into the combustion chamber. Second, as it comes up, the piston compresses the fuel-air mixture. Third, a spark from the spark plug ignites the mixture, which pushes the piston down again. Fourth, the exhaust valve opens, and as it comes up, the piston pushes the spent gases out. And the cycle starts over again. Intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. Intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. Intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. Intake, compression, combustion, exhaust.
Henry Ford was the developer and manufacturer of the Model T, the first affordable middle-class consumer car. He's attributed as saying, "If I had asked people what they wanted in a future car technology, that they would ask for faster horses." In 1922, he would write his autobiography, My Life and Work, which greatly revolutionized the auto industry. And by the mid-1920s, over 14 million Model Ts would have been produced. 4,000 miles away in Europe, Ferdinand Porsche would have his own idea for a mass-produced people's car. And in May 1937, Volkswagen, or the People's Car Company, would be founded. The goal of this company would be to produce a people's car, which held the promise of independence, freedom, and value. However, this idea would be put on hold due to the beginning of World War II in September of 1939. The Volkswagen factory would be used to make military vehicles, and as a result, would be bombed in 1944. At the end of World War II in 1945, Germany would be defeated and conquered and taken over by the Allies. However, Volkswagen would rebuild. First, under Ivan Herz, who put this factory back into service to produce 20,000 vehicles for the Allied forces. Later in 1948, Henry Nordiff would take control. He's general manager. He was trained by General Motors, and under him, Volkswagen would produce over 1 million cars. Let's take a look at a film clip of the 1 millionth car celebration.
Ever heard of Volkswagen? Certainly, everybody nowadays has heard of it. The home of the automobile that has taken the world by storm. There it happened one fine day that a golden car rolled off the assembly line. It was the millionth car of that model. And all those who had worked on the million cars rejoiced with the one man who was honored on behalf of them all.
Volkswagen would later enter the US market in the 1950s. However, reception was slow. In 1959, they would hire Dole Dane Bernbach to create a number of iconic ads that highlighted the Volkswagen's small size and unusual shape as a benefit to the consumer.
This year, just about everyone's coming out with a brand new small car. So this year, just about everyone will be telling you about this great new idea. To think it is a great idea. We at Volkswagen have been working on it for 21 years.
Dole Dane Bernbach would go on to make a number of iconic ads, resulting in a drastic increase in US sales of Beetles. And by 1963, Volkswagen had produced 10 million cars. And 9 years later, in 1972, they would produce 15 million cars, overtaking the Model T as the fastest produced car in the world. In the 1960s, the Volkswagen became an iconic symbol of the counterculture of that time, embodying the free spirit of the youth. The Volkswagen Beetle became so popular that it took a starring role in the 1968 Disney movie, The Love Bug.
By the 60s, environmental movements and safety movements began to come to the fore, and society was changing. The following video is of a commercial shot by the advertising agency that handled Volkswagen's campaign.
They each had $3,000. With his money, Mr. Jones bought himself a $3,000 car. With his money, Mr. Krempler bought himself a new refrigerator, a new range, a new washer, a new dryer, a record player, 2 new television sets, and a brand new Volkswagen.
So what's amazing here is that consumerism is on the rise. People are buying a lot of products, and it turns out that lots of these products are dangerous. They contain dangerous dangerous ingredients. Rachel Carlson releases a book called Silent Spring in the early 60s, which makes the connection between the environmental hazards and consumer health. Later, Ralph Nader releases a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, and this book essentially highlights the risks of a market that's unregulated. There are no seatbelts in cars, and consumers are getting hurt.
The Clean Air Act of 1970 is regarded as the most comprehensive air pollution control bill in American history. It was a response in large part to the American public's urgent call for action to address what it saw as an environmental state of emergency. And it was the product of a strong and committed bipartisan effort in Congress. The consensus was overwhelming. It was time to place the protection of our air, water, and land on the forefront of our national agenda. What was the foundation for that commitment? How and why did it come about? And most important, what can we learn from it?
So by the 70s, we had both environmental regulations and health regulations. But there's a third factor that was going to enter the equation for the American economy, and that is the embargoes of the early and late 70s. These embargoes would, in turn, force the price of gas up threefold in the United States. And what that would do is put a tremendous strain on automakers to produce more efficient vehicles. Under the leadership of about a dozen executives, Volkswagen would navigate these various challenges and come out in a very good position. In the recent times, Volkswagen acquired a number of brands, and they currently hold a portfolio of about 12, including Volkswagen. While all this is going on, the American manufacturers and the Japanese manufacturers are also facing these challenges, and they're doing quite well. Through our research, what we discovered, which is particularly fascinating, is that the evolution of automotive technology has been diesel, leaded, unleaded, hybrid, and electric. And what's so fascinating about Volkswagen's story is that they have remained stuck in 1906. It's simply fascinating. So, we've begun to ask ourselves, what is happening here? Why would they do that? As you can imagine, we've got some major problems. So bad that we have a clip from 60 Minutes.
Welcome back. As corporate scandals go, it's hard to overstate the size of the crisis involving Volkswagen. Put simply, the German auto giant has been caught lying on a spectacular scale. 11 million of its clean diesel engine cars were equipped with software deliberately programmed to cheat pollution tests. It's not only a blatant con, it is highly illegal. In Australia, 10 Volkswagen models have now been suspended from sale, and 77,000 vehicles face recall at the very least. It appears Volkswagen's ruthless drive to be world #1 produced a dirty secret. Diesel engines that just couldn't deliver on high performance and still meet environmental standards. But this is also a true David and Goliath story, because for 8 years, Volkswagen managed to fool everyone.
So what's going on here? Apparently, Volkswagen installed a cheat device that would trick the engine into thinking that when it's idling, it's being inspected. With that instrument running, it would hold down the emissions. When the car was on the highway, it would turn off, and the emissions were 40 times the EPA standards. When this hit the press, Volkswagen's then CEO said that he had no knowledge of this happening. But within 5 days, he resigned.
Volkswagen CEO Martin Winterkorn is a VW veteran and a highly regarded engineer, an infamous stickler for detail. So many were shocked when Volkswagen was caught cheating on its emissions tests. Just one day after this videotaped apology from the CEO,
I am deeply sorry that we have broken this trust.
So how bad could things get? It turns out that we are witnessing a brand in crises. 11 months have passed since the first news broke, and all over the world, Volkswagen is going to have recalls. There are 11 million cars produced that have this defeat technology, 500,000 of which are in the United States. In response to this, Volkswagen has released a slew of information to kind of quell the unrest that's happening in their market. They're apologizing to customers, they're announcing to the markets that they're taking action, more apology campaigns, and it's led to the current CEO to actually apologize to the President of the United States. He called him on the phone to say he was sorry for the error. Because things are getting bad, Volkswagen has then released a new campaign. It's a goodwill package designed to help people believe in this brand. They're offering $1,000 to anyone who stays, and they're offering roadside assistance for 3 years. Simultaneously, the new CEO released a plan called Strategy 2025. And in this plan, they're acknowledging that they've made a mistake. They're talking about 30 new cars, investing in green technology, etc. The problem is they made that advance to their clients before the Justice Department sanctioned them. 2 weeks ago, the Justice Department penalized them $15 billion. They have to give everyone who purchased one of these cars between $5,000 and $10,000. They've got to pay towards cleanup costs, and they've got to advertise zero-emission vehicles. How in the world could something like this happen to a brand that's 70 years old? It's got this amazing history, these amazing products. Why would they do this when none of their competitors are adhering to the strategy? Everyone has abandoned diesel aside from large trucks. As we asked this question, we came across a quote from an insider, an executive at Volkswagen, who said, "The emissions scandal was inevitable at VW because the company's isolation, its clannish board, and deep-rooted hostility to environmental regulations and it's among its engineers." As we began to research this even further, we would find that there's a case of poor governance, arrogance, and poor innovation. Sticking to the strategy undermined everything Volkswagen stands for. Another thing is happening. Culture is changing. And as it shifts, we're moving from ownership to sharing, but most importantly in this list, we see fossil fuels. They're now passé, and people are moving, countries are moving, society is moving towards a more green world. At the same time, brands are emerging that are filling this change. We've got Tesla, automated cars, sharing, transforming the world we know. So what is the future for a brand that would take a risk like this and throw it all away, chasing a technology that's outdated? We believe that Volkswagen at this point should reshape the future of mobility with intuitive, sustainable, and inventive products. So the campaign for about 15 years has been Das Auto, which means the people's car. And we believe at this point that Volkswagen should flip the script 180 degrees on the situation and turn it into my auto.
This will be achieved through CARE Technologies. CARE Technologies is an umbrella of various technological initiatives, including ULAS, Luft, and Simon. ULAS is named after the Danish astronomer, Olaus Romer, who was able to measure the speed of light in 1967. And it's a solar membrane that harnesses the power of solar energy and uses it to power various forms of transportation, from automotive to trains, from truck, to trains. The second technology is Luft, a German word for air. This is it's a technology that purifies the air through various forms of filters. So the air getting out of the car ends up being cleaner than the air coming in. And you'll be able to measure the impact of your footprint of the journey from your dashboard. The lighter your footprint, the greener the dashboard from the leaves. The third technology is Simon. Simon is an integrated technology platform that integrates your smartphone to your home, to your car. Simon says your heart rate is 98. It will be also able to measure your own temperature. And you'll also be able to measure access the security systems in your home through your dashboard and your iPhone.
So how do we communicate this to the public? In the 1960s, Birnbach created a series of ads that highlighted the benefits of their products. We envision a situation where we would highlight the new products that Volkswagen introduces through a series of campaigns that make it very clear what they stand for, what their values are, and the importance of the environment. So we start off with Das Auto, the people's brand. For 70 years, Volkswagen has demonstrated amazing products, touched the lives of millions of people, and achieved something that very few brands have done in the automotive industry. Somehow, in the last decade, they managed to put themselves in a position, through a series of horrible choices, where they arrive at a campaign with a brand that is not true. It turns out that this is a horrible lie. Volkswagen must have known that diesel technology could not be clean. So again, we believe that Volkswagen has an opportunity now to change what they stand for and alter how people view them. We suggest that Volkswagen should reshape the future of mobility with intuitive, sustainable, and inventive products and reposition the brand with people at the center. Thank you.
You made the journey. I'm Scott Lerman. I'm one of the founding faculty of the program. Melanie Wiesenthal, who was also a faculty advisor on this, couldn't make it today, but she sends her greetings and her question. You have had a kind of rare opportunity here to not just in a hypothetical way look at a brand in crisis, but to live through that crisis yourselves. As you were doing your work, you would come in each week with clippings of unfolding changes in the strategic direction of this company. So I'm going to get you on the other side of this equation. How would you evaluate Volkswagen's response as a brand to this crisis?
We, from what we've seen, they've done a pretty poor job. It started off with failing to acknowledge that it happened, CEOs resigning, executives leaving. The world knows now that they lied. It's inevitable now that this is going to hurt the brand, and they didn't get ahead of it.
To add to Malik's point, their actions have been reactive more than proactive. So, so maybe they could have been more proactive than they were. I mean, it's been 10 months now since the whole situation started, and it's been taking them very long to react.
Chelsea, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think that they could have did a better job, and I think that the $1,000 rebate, it was just to pacify the customers. I don't think that that was good enough. It should have been something more.
Thank you. So for those of you at Volkswagen who are watching this on the live stream, there's some people who are ready to help you do a better job. One of the questions that we talked about in doing this program is Volkswagen is the corporate brand as well as one of the trade brands. And as you pointed out, there is a rich portfolio of other brand names that they own, that they actually are responsible for. Should Volkswagen consider abandoning the corporate name of Volkswagen and moving to something else?
I don't believe they should. I think that what we demonstrated was more an expression of the brand. I don't think we were advocating they completely change their branding. I think they really have to simply reposition themselves and align themselves with values that are current. They chased a technology that is old and outdated, and it hurts the environment. They have to push themselves, I guess, internally to acknowledge that, number one, and two, build products that meet those standards.
And one final question. This is a major shift, one following a crisis which quickly changed our perceptions about a great brand. How long does it take to repair a brand like this?
We have no idea. This has been worse than we expected. The way the story unfolded, it just got worse and worse over time, and different markets around the world are responding in unique ways. They have different relationships with Volkswagen's brands, and so we're not clear that we've ever seen this before, number one, but more importantly, that there is a way to deal with it before they make the change. The 2025 campaign stipulates that they must move to to zero-emission cars. That's going to take them years. As Kamel noted a while back, they sold 100,000 green cars total. And that's, I mean, it's a fraction, so it's going to take a while to change the perception of the consumer, we believe.
I mean, Volkswagen has a special place in a lot of people's hearts. When we interviewed a lot of the users in the US, Germany, and the UK. So I think there is a special spot there, but and it depends on their reaction. If they take like if they make drastic changes, they'll be able to recover. I think it depends on how drastic the measures they take, but they already have like a lot of the people we interviewed, those even with affected cars, were when we asked them, would you buy another Volkswagen car, they would still buy it.
So there's still hope. Thank you.
Thank you.